Yo, what up, Street Talks? Eric Kim. So, a thought. Just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it can't happen. So, the basic crux of this notion is expect the unexpected. So, let me share my thoughts. So, before Donald Trump got elected, everyone thought he had 0.00% chance of getting it, and now he's president. So, to me, what I found interesting was, before that actually happened, people thought it was an impossibility and they thought it was an implausibility. But now that's happened, it really shows that anything is possible. Another example. So Jay-Z, when he started rapping, the thought of a billionaire rapper was not even a concept. It's like, you can't even think of a thought that doesn't even exist yet, right? And yet, he's done it, and so now he set the precedent that it actually is possible to become a billionaire rapper. So you could even become, who knows, maybe one day they could create a trillionaire rapper, or a billionaire photographer, or a trillionaire photographer, whatever. Same thing with Apple. Before Apple, the thought of a $1 trillion company was unthinkable, and now I bet you in the next 20 years it's gonna be more of a regularity. Similar other concepts, before Eddie Hall deadlifted 500 kilos, which is around like 1,200 pounds. I don't know, maybe people didn't think it was possible. Then when he did it, it's proven that it's possible for a human to do it. So maybe in the future we'll actually see, who knows, a 600 kilo deadlift or whatever. So obviously there's certain limits to human strength. We'll probably never see a 1,000 kilo deadlift from anybody, but still, I think maybe what's interesting to me is if you care enough about something, it's worth trying and it's worth attempting. So, my thought is this. Truly, 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 anything is possible. Anything can happen. And how are we to live our lives? So some practical thoughts. Don't be caught with your pants down, and don't be fooled, don't be a sucker. And in some ways, expect it to be worse. So, for example, we often fall victim to the planning fallacy, which means we tend to think that we can achieve more in a short period of time than we actually can. And so it just means adding buffer. So for example, let's say you think it's gonna take you, let's say you're running late for a dinner with your friend, and let's say you're running 30 minutes late. We feel guilty about saying that we're running late, but maybe say that we'll be there in like 45 minutes. Because it actually might take you 45 minutes or even longer. Other example too is, flights almost never run on time, they always run a little bit longer. So when you tell people your ETA or almost anything, try to budget in more buffer time. Generally speaking, I try to add like at least a 20% buffer to what I think is gonna happen and add that to reality. Some other things too is that, I think optimism and over-optimism is generally a good trait for us to have, but we also shouldn't get suckered by it too. So for example, you're starting a company, we think it's gonna earn X amount of money. Maybe it's good to put your estimate 20% less or 50% less, because making money on the internet is really, really hard. So, especially in today's uncertain times, it's kind of interesting. We've tried to, so before coronavirus, nothing has probably ever affected the world's economy this much. And so, before coronavirus happened, the thought of the whole nation or world, whatever, where they're shutting down restaurants, coffee shops, and everything in between, straight up, like even for myself, I thought that notion was totally unthinkable. Or even, before they invented Bitcoin and crypto, the thought of a digital currency or a digital money that doesn't have any sort of, gold-based value-backed stuff was kind of unthinkable too. And to me, this is actually a very optimistic thought, because I think the wrong bias we have is, especially with Google and Google Maps and whatever, we think everything in the world's already been discovered and everything's already done and it's not worth doing. So even the same thing with like YouTube and blogs and websites and apps and stuff like that is a lot of people get discouraged before they even start or try because they think, oh, what's the point of doing YouTube? There's already 1 trillion people out there. But my thought is, just because people have had children in the past doesn't stop people from having children. So I think it's actually really important and really essential for us to consider, just because other people have done it before doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to do it ourselves because we enjoy doing it. Or similar thought, just because something hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it cannot happen. So even with this whole like crazy thing happening right now, everyone's like, wow, this is so bad. I'm like, yo, why isn't this worse? I think it can and like, it not should be worse, but it could be like 1 trillion times worse. Cause like, you know, it's very tragic that a lot of people in the world are dying and stuff like that. But I'm just kind of curious, like, yo, how many people die every day from like drug overdoses, you know, car accident, texting while driving, alcoholism, cocaine overdoses, methamphetamines, whatever. And so that's why I tend to not be so scared right now. And I'm just like, you know, I would actually be much more afraid if, because I was talking to one of my friends who's a med student, and he told me that essentially like Corona is more infectious than, let's say, Ebola, but the deadliness of like Ebola or stuff is actually far worse than coronavirus. So it's tricky because with coronavirus, it's very easy for you to get it, but just because you get it doesn't mean you'll necessarily die. So I was thinking more like, yo, imagine like 10-20 years from now, let's say Corona version 2 comes around, and then literally it's even more infective and it's actually even more deadly. And I'm like, holy shit, this would be really, really scary. So to me, it's kind of adopting a stoic mentality where you expect the worst to happen and you expect even worse things to happen, but just kind of to mentally prepare yourself for it. So I mean, some practical things, right? You know, it's creating like a financial buffer. So probably one of my most grateful things, Cindy's really good with money. I instituted a rule for myself like a few years back. It's like, I need Cindy's explicit permission if I want to buy anything over $300. And it's actually been a pretty good rule because it's prevented me from buying a lot of stupid stuff. And now that, you know, everyone's trying to go a little bit more lean, I'm glad that we actually have a pretty big financial buffer. So I ain't tripping. But imagine if you had a, you know, $1 million home mortgage, had a car payment, you know, insurance, all these other bills and stuff like that. Times are probably really, really difficult for you now. So it's not to just like cast moral or ethical judgment on nobodies, but just kind of remind, just like, you know, think to yourself, things could get worse. Maybe asking yourself, why aren't things worse yet? And if you expect the worst or you expect even worser, then actually we could actually prepare ourselves in meaningful ways. So like, I know for myself, essentially it's kind of like you prepare for even worser, and therefore when the bad thing actually happens, it's not as bad as you thought it'd be. So it's just like, you know, even Nassim Taleb has like a story where, you know, when he was working as a trader, every single day he went to the office, he imagined like he lost all the monies. And so even though he took a small loss, he didn't feel as bad as if he lost the whole portfolio. And so yeah, so some basic thoughts to think. So always expect the unexpected, because a lot of unexpected things have happened and will continue to happen. And I think especially because today's world is so globalized, so tech, so kind of weird and unpredictable. Yeah, like, don't become a doomsdayer where you just kind of like lock yourself up in home. You know, follow your own gut. Generally, my prescription is just don't follow the news. Just talk to real people, and let the notion of expecting the unexpected actually make you more brave, more courageous, knowing that, you know, bad shit and really even potentially worse shit can and probably will happen, but just knowing that you're strong enough to handle it and you're stronger than you think.